The year is dark with uncertainty. Jerusalem is no longer safe. In the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign, the armies of Babylon arrive at the gates, not by chance, not by accident. The Lord allows Jerusalem to fall, the sacred city is breached, the temple treasures are taken, and the future of Judah is carried away into exile. But this story is not about defeat. It is about what happens after everything is lost, inside the palace of Babylon. A new plan begins. The king orders that the brightest minds be taken, young men without flaw, strong in body, sharp in wisdom, trained not to fight, but to serve. Their language will be erased. Their names will be changed. Their faith will be tested. Among them are 4 youths from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. They are given new identities, new food, a new future designed by a foreign empire, but one decision changes everything. Daniel draws a quiet line in his heart. He will not defile himself, not with the king's food, not with the king's wine, not even to save his own life. It is a small act of resistance, but history turns on small acts. For 10 days, the world watches, and God responds, because when kingdoms rise and fall, faithfulness still matters, and this is only the beginning. The world of ancient Judah was collapsing, even if many people inside Jerusalem did not yet realize it. Kings still sat on thrones, priests still walked into the temple courts, and sacrifices still burned on the altar. But beyond the city walls, history was already moving. Empires were shifting, borders were redrawn by armies, and a new power was rising from the east: Babylon. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, the moment arrived when the illusion of safety finally shattered. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched his forces toward Jerusalem with ruthless precision. This was not merely a military campaign. It was a declaration that Judah no longer controlled its own destiny. When Babylon laid siege to the city, resistance was brief and ultimately meaningless. The walls that once symbolized divine protection could not stop the tide. And yet, the most unsettling truth of all was not that Babylon was stronger, but that the Lord allowed it to happen. Jerusalem fell not because God was weak, but because judgment had come. The city was taken, and with it came humiliation. Nebuchadnezzar did not only conquer land, he conquered identity. Sacred objects from the temple of God were removed, not destroyed, but carried away to Babylon and placed inside the treasury of a pagan god. It was a symbolic act. Judah's God appeared defeated, his treasures now displayed inside a foreign sanctuary. To the watching world, it looked like Babylon's gods had triumphed, but the story of Daniel does not begin with victory. It begins with exile. Nebuchadnezzar was not interested only in gold and silver. He understood something deeper about power. Conquering a nation was temporary. Reshaping its future was permanent. And so he gave an order that would quietly change history. From among the Israelites, he demanded young men taken from the royal family and the nobility. These were not slaves meant for labor. These were minds meant to be molded. The requirements were precise. They had to be physically perfect, intelligent, educated, and capable of learning quickly. They were to be trained in the language and literature of the Babylonians, immersed in the worldview of the empire, and prepared to serve in the king's palace. Their past would be erased. Their future would belong to Babylon. Among those chosen were 4 young men from the tribe of Judah. Their names were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Each name carried meaning. Each one proclaimed loyalty to the God of Israel. But the first step in Babylon's transformation was simple: remove their names. Daniel was renamed Belshazzar. Hananiah became Shadrach. Mishael became Meshach. Azariah became Abed-nego. It was more than a change of sound. It was a change of allegiance. Their new names honored Babylonian gods. Every time they were called, the empire reminded them who now claimed ownership over their lives. They were given a new education, a new culture, and even a new diet. Each day, they were assigned food and wine from the king's table. To Babylon, this was privilege. To refuse it would be foolish, dangerous, possibly fatal. But Daniel saw what others did not. He understood that the true battle was not over survival, it was over faithfulness. Somewhere between exile and assimilation, Daniel made a decision that would define his life. The text does not describe a debate or a struggle. It simply says that Daniel resolved in his heart not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. This was not rebellion. It was conviction. The food from the king's table was likely associated with pagan rituals offered to idols before it was eaten. To consume it would be to quietly accept Babylon's gods. Daniel understood that compromise does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes daily, politely, and disguised as generosity. Daniel approached the chief official, not with arrogance, but with humility. He asked for permission not to defile himself. And here, something remarkable happens. The same God who allowed Jerusalem to fall now causes this Babylonian official to show favor and compassion toward Daniel. Even in exile, God was present, yet fear still ruled the system. The official was afraid. If Daniel and his friends grew weak, it would cost him his life. Babylon did not tolerate failure. And so Daniel offered a test, not a protest, not a threat, but a test of faith. For 10 days, he asked, "Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare us with the others who eat the king's food. Judge by what you see." It was a risk. 10 days could determine their fate. When the test ended, the result could not be ignored. Daniel and his companions looked healthier, stronger, and better nourished than those who ate from the royal table. What Babylon intended for control, God turned into testimony. From that moment on, the guard removed the royal food and gave them what they requested. The lesson was already clear. Obedience to God did not weaken them, it strengthened them. As their training continued, something else became evident. God gave these 4 young men knowledge and understanding beyond their education. Daniel, in particular, was given insight into visions and dreams, something Babylon valued deeply but never truly mastered. At the end of their training, they were brought before Nebuchadnezzar himself. The king questioned them, tested them, measured their wisdom against all others. And when he finished, he found no one equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. In every matter of wisdom and understanding, they were 10 times better than the magicians and enchanters of the entire kingdom. Babylon believed it had reshaped them, but the truth was the opposite. God had planted his servants inside the heart of the empire, and Daniel remained there from the reign of Nebuchadnezzar to the rise of Persia, quietly faithful, dangerously wise, and divinely positioned for what was yet to come, because the real test was not food. It was power, and the story had only begun. Nebuchadnezzar was the most powerful man on earth. Yet power did not give him peace. One night, long after the celebration of conquest had faded, sleep abandoned him. His mind was restless, troubled by a dream so vivid and terrifying that it refused to loosen its grip even after his eyes opened. The images burned themselves into his memory, but their meaning remained locked away, unreachable, just beyond understanding. He knew only one thing with certainty: this dream was not ordinary. Fear followed him into the daylight. In Babylon, dreams were not dismissed as imagination. They were messages, warnings, sometimes declarations from the gods themselves. And this dream felt heavy with consequence. Nebuchadnezzar summoned his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers, the intellectual elite of the empire. These were men trained from childhood to interpret signs, read omens, and uncover hidden meanings. If anyone could explain what troubled the king, it would be them. But Nebuchadnezzar was not willing to make this easy. He did not tell them the dream. Instead, he demanded something impossible. He ordered them not only to interpret the dream, but to tell him what the dream was. If they truly possessed divine insight, they would know. If they failed, there would be no mercy. The decree was brutal and final. Their lives depended on an answer they could not give. The wise men protested. No king had ever demanded such a thing. No human could know another man's dream unless it was revealed. They pleaded, reasoned, and delayed, but Nebuchadnezzar's patience was gone. To him, their failure exposed a lie. Their wisdom was an illusion, their power a performance, and so the command was issued: all the wise men of Babylon were to be executed. The decree did not discriminate. It did not matter whether they had been consulted or not. The order included Daniel and his companions, young men who had done nothing wrong, who had not even been summoned to the king's presence. Death was coming for them because Babylon's wisdom had failed. When Daniel learned of the decree, he did not panic. He did not flee. He did not curse Babylon or question God aloud. Instead, he acted with calm urgency. He approached Arioch, the commander tasked with carrying out the executions, and asked for time. Not defiance time. Time to seek an answer. What Daniel understood, and Babylon did not, was this: the problem was not that the dream was hidden. The problem was that Babylon was asking the wrong source. Daniel returned to his house and told Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah everything. Together, they prayed not for survival alone, but for mercy, for revelation, for truth. They knew what was at stake. This was not merely about their lives. The credibility of God himself stood against the wisdom of an empire. That night, while Babylon slept in fear and confusion, heaven answered. The mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Not gradually, not partially, completely. The dream, its meaning, its message. God did not withhold anything, and Daniel did not celebrate. He worshipped. He praised the God of heaven, declaring that wisdom and power belonged to him alone. He acknowledged that God changes times and seasons, that he raises kings and removes them, that knowledge does not originate in human intellect, but is given by divine will. Daniel understood that this revelation was not a reward, it was a responsibility. At dawn, Daniel went to Arioch and stopped the executions. He requested an audience with the king, not with confidence in himself, but with certainty in God. Nebuchadnezzar listened. Daniel stood before the most powerful ruler on earth and spoke words that redefined power itself. He made it clear that no wise man, enchanter, magician, or astrologer could explain the dream. But there was a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And the dream was not about Babylon alone. It was about what was to come. Then Daniel described the dream. A great statue, dazzling and terrifying in appearance, stood before the king. Its head was made of pure gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron. Its feet were a mixture of iron and clay, strong and fragile at the same time. As the king watched, a stone cut without human hands struck the statue at its feet. The entire structure collapsed, shattered into dust, and was blown away like chaff. The stone grew into a mountain that filled the whole earth. Nebuchadnezzar knew instantly that Daniel had spoken truth. The dream was his. The images were exact. The fear returned, but now it was paired with understanding. Daniel explained. The statue represented kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar himself was the head of gold, the greatest empire of his time, granted power by God. But after Babylon would come another kingdom, then another, each inferior in glory, but unstoppable in purpose. Human empires would rise and fall, each believing itself permanent, but they were not. The stone represented a kingdom not made by human hands, a kingdom established by God, a kingdom that would crush all others and endure forever. No alliance, no army, no empire could stop it. For the first time, Nebuchadnezzar bowed not just physically, but mentally. He acknowledged that Daniel's God was truly the Lord of Kings and the revealer of mysteries. Daniel was elevated, promoted, and placed in authority. His friends were also advanced to positions of leadership. Babylon thought it had trained Daniel. Instead, God had positioned him. But power has a way of testing belief. Nebuchadnezzar's acknowledgement would not last. Soon, the dream that humbled him would be replaced by an image of pride. The king would build a statue not of mixed materials, but entirely of gold. And he would demand worship. The question would no longer be about wisdom. It would be about allegiance. And the fire was coming. Power has a way of revealing what humility hides. For a time, Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged the God of Daniel, but acknowledgement is not surrender. As Babylon's dominance continued and its wealth multiplied, the memory of the dream slowly shifted. What once warned him about the limits of power now became a challenge to overcome. And so, the king decided to reshape the message. If his empire would not last forever, he would make it appear as if it could. Nebuchadnezzar ordered the construction of an enormous image on the plain of Dura. It towered over the land, gleaming under the sun, entirely covered in gold. Unlike the statue in his dream, this one had no silver, no bronze, no iron, no weakness. It was a declaration. Babylon was not one kingdom among many. Babylon was everything. And Nebuchadnezzar would ensure that everyone knew it. When the image was completed, a summons went out across the empire. Officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all rulers of provinces were commanded to attend the dedication. This was not optional. Attendance was loyalty. Absence was rebellion. At the sound of music, everyone was ordered to fall down and worship the golden image. Failure would result in immediate execution, death by fire in a blazing furnace prepared nearby. The message was clear. Worship was no longer private. Faith was no longer personal. Allegiance would be proven publicly or punished permanently. As the instrument sounded, the crowd moved as one. Knees bent, faces pressed toward the ground. The empire worshipped what it had built. But three figures remained standing: Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. They were not shouting. They were not protesting. They were simply refusing. Their defiance was impossible to miss. In a system built on fear, courage becomes an offense. Certain officials noticed immediately and rushed to report it. These men, they said, paid no attention to the king's command. They did not serve Babylon's gods. They did not worship the image. It was not ignorance. It was deliberate. Nebuchadnezzar's response was fury. He summoned them at once. Their rise in the empire had made them visible, and their refusal made them dangerous. Standing before the king, they were given one final chance. The music would play again. If they bowed, all would be forgiven. If not, they would be thrown into the furnace. Then came the challenge, spoken not only to them, but to the heavens themselves. What God, the king demanded, would be able to rescue them from his hand? Their answer was calm. They did not insult the king. They did not argue theology. They did not beg. They simply stated the truth. The God they served was able to deliver them from the furnace. But even if he did not, they would not serve Babylon's gods or worship the image. This was not confidence in survival. It was commitment without conditions. Nebuchadnezzar's rage intensified. The furnace was heated 7 times hotter than usual, as if fire could overpower conviction. The strongest soldiers were ordered to bind the 3 men and throw them into the flames. The heat was so intense that the soldiers themselves were killed as they approached. Babylon's power could not even protect its own servants. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell into the fire bound, but they did not burn. Moments later, Nebuchadnezzar stood up in shock. His anger turned into terror. He asked his advisors if 3 men had been thrown into the furnace. When they confirmed it, the king pointed toward the flames. He saw 4 men walking around, unbound, unharmed. And the 4th, he said, looked like a son of the gods. The fire that was meant to destroy became a place of divine presence. Nebuchadnezzar approached the furnace and called them out. When they emerged, the crowd saw something impossible. Their bodies were unharmed. Their hair was not singed. Their clothes were untouched. There was not even the smell of fire on them. Babylon had failed. Nebuchadnezzar spoke again, but this time his voice was different. He praised the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, declaring that no other God could save in this way. He issued a decree protecting their God from blasphemy and promoted them further within the empire, but still, the lesson was incomplete. Nebuchadnezzar praised God's power, but he had not yet surrendered his pride, and pride does not die quietly. Years passed. Babylon prospered. The king's authority expanded. And then, one night, another dream came. This one did not terrify him with mystery. It unsettled him with clarity. In the dream, a massive tree stood at the center of the earth. It grew tall and strong, visible to the ends of the world. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant. Animals rested in its shade. Birds nested in its branches. All life was sustained by it. Then a messenger descended from heaven. The command was spoken. The tree was to be cut down, its branches stripped, its fruit scattered. Only the stump would remain, bound with iron and bronze. The mind of the one it represented would be changed. He would live like an animal until he acknowledged that heaven rules. Nebuchadnezzar knew this dream mattered. This time, he told Daniel everything. Daniel listened and was troubled. For a moment, he hesitated. Not because he lacked understanding, but because he knew the cost of truth. The dream was not about nations. It was about the king himself. Daniel wished it applied to Babylon's enemies instead. But truth does not change for comfort. He spoke. The tree represented Nebuchadnezzar. His greatness had reached the world. His power sustained many. But pride had grown alongside prosperity. The dream was a warning. If the king did not humble himself, he would be driven away from humanity. He would live among animals, eat grass, and lose his sanity until he acknowledged that God alone rules kingdoms. Daniel urged repentance. He begged the king to renounce his sins, show mercy to the oppressed, and avoid what was coming. For a year, nothing happened. Then one day, walking on the roof of his palace, Nebuchadnezzar looked out over Babylon. The city was magnificent. The walls were vast. The temples gleamed. And the king spoke words that sealed his fate. He declared Babylon to be the work of his own power, built for his own glory. The sentence fell immediately. His mind broke. He was driven from human society. He lived like an animal, his hair growing long, his nails untrimmed. The greatest ruler on earth became the lowest creature in the field. Time passed, and then something changed. Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes toward heaven. His sanity returned with his humility. He acknowledged the Most High, praised him, and honored him. He declared that God's dominion is eternal, that all people are nothing compared to him, and that no one can stop his hand or question his actions. The king, who once demanded worship, finally understood it. Pride had fallen. God had been proven sovereign not through fire, not through dreams, but through patience, and Daniel remained faithful, steady, unmoved. But Babylon's story was nearing its end, and another night was coming, one filled with writing on the wall. Babylon did not fall in a moment of weakness. It fell in a moment of arrogance. Long after Nebuchadnezzar was gone, the empire still stood tall, its walls thick, its gates secure, its reputation unchallenged. The Euphrates flowed beneath its defenses, and Babylon believed itself untouchable. Inside the city, celebration replaced vigilance. Confidence drowned caution. And on one fateful night, pride gathered itself into a feast. Belshazzar ruled as king, surrounded by wealth inherited but not earned. He did not carry the scars of conquest, nor did he remember the warnings written into Babylon's history. He knew of Nebuchadnezzar's madness and recovery, but he did not learn from it. Instead, he treated the past as a legend rather than a lesson. And so, while enemy armies camped beyond the walls, Belshazzar prepared a banquet. The hall filled with nobles, wives, concubines, music, laughter, and wine. Gold reflected firelight. Voices echoed against stone. The atmosphere was loud with certainty. Babylon was safe. Babylon was eternal. Babylon feared nothing. Then Belshazzar made a choice that crossed an invisible line. He ordered the sacred vessels taken from the temple in Jerusalem to be brought into the feast. Cups once set apart for worship were now filled with wine for mockery. Kings and guests drank from them, praising gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. What Nebuchadnezzar had taken in conquest, Belshazzar now used in insult, and heaven answered immediately. In the midst of laughter, a hand appeared. No body, no voice, just fingers writing on the wall near the lampstand, where all could see. The room froze. Music stopped. Wine spilled. Belshazzar's face drained of color. His knees knocked together, and his strength left him. Power vanished in the presence of the unknown. The words glowed on the plaster. Unreadable, yet unmistakably intentional, Belshazzar summoned his wise men, promising riches, power, and honor to anyone who could read and explain the writing. But once again, Babylon's wisdom failed. No one could interpret it. The gods they praised were silent. Fear spread through the hall. Then the queen spoke. She remembered a man from the days of Nebuchadnezzar, a man in whom the spirit of the holy God was said to dwell, a man known for understanding mysteries, dreams, and signs. Daniel. Daniel was summoned not as an honored guest, but as a last resort. He entered the hall of excess with calm authority. Belshazzar offered him rewards, purple robes, a gold chain, and power within the kingdom. Daniel refused them all. Wealth had no meaning on a night like this. Instead, he spoke truth. He reminded Belshazzar of Nebuchadnezzar, of how power had been given and then taken, of how pride had led to madness and humility to restoration. And then Daniel delivered the charge. Belshazzar had known all of this, yet he had not humbled his heart. Instead, he had exalted himself against the Lord of heaven. Then Daniel read the words, numbered, weighed, divided. The meaning was final. God had numbered the days of Belshazzar's reign and brought it to an end. The king had been weighed and found wanting. The kingdom would be divided and given to others. There was no time to repent. That very night, Babylon fell. While the feast continued, enemy forces diverted the river that flowed beneath the city walls. Soldiers entered through the exposed gates. No alarm was raised. No defense organized. The empire that trusted its walls more than its God collapsed silently. Belshazzar was killed. By morning, Babylon belonged to another empire, and Daniel lived on. Under the new rule, Daniel's faith did not fade with age. His integrity did not soften. His devotion did not adapt to politics. When a new decree forbade prayer to any god except the king, Daniel did not protest publicly. He did not hide privately. He simply continued as he always had. 3 times a day, he prayed, windows open, facing Jerusalem. He was seen, and he was reported. The law could not be changed. Daniel was arrested, not as a criminal, but as an example. The king who respected him was trapped by his own decree. At sunset, Daniel was thrown into a den of lions, sealed inside with a stone, and the king's own signet. That night, the king did not sleep till dawn. He ran to the den and called out with a voice filled with dread. Daniel answered, God had sent his angel. The lions' mouths were shut. No harm had come to him. Daniel emerged untouched. Those who accused him were thrown in and did not survive. The king proclaimed that Daniel's God is the living God, enduring forever, whose kingdom will not be destroyed. Daniel prospered, not because empires favored him, but because God sustained him. And when the visions came of beasts, horns, kingdoms, and the Son of Man, Daniel understood something Babylon never did. Empires rise, empires fall, but the kingdom of God remains. As the years passed and kings rose and fell around him, Daniel's role quietly shifted. He was no longer only an interpreter of dreams for others. He became a witness to visions meant for generations he would never meet. In the stillness of night, when empires slept, believing themselves secure, revelations came that stretched beyond Babylon, beyond Persia, beyond Daniel's own lifetime. These visions did not flatter human power. They exposed it. One night, Daniel saw the great sea churned by violent winds, chaos stirred by unseen forces, and from those restless waters rose beasts unlike anything on earth. The first was like a lion with eagle's wings, lifted from the ground and made to stand like a man. Its heart changed. The second was like a bear, raised up on one side, devouring much flesh at the command it was given. The third was like a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, swift beyond resistance, authority divided, yet powerful. Then came the fourth, terrifying and indescribable, with iron teeth, crushing and devouring, trampling what remained. Unlike any beast before, it crowned with horns that spoke arrogance. As Daniel watched, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat, clothing white as snow, hair like pure wool, fire flowing from before him, thousands upon thousands attending him, books opened not by human hands. Judgment was not delayed. The beasts lost their dominion, stripped, not by rebellion, but by decree. Then Daniel saw one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven, approaching the Ancient of Days, given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations, peoples, and languages served him. His dominion was everlasting. His kingdom would never pass away. Daniel was shaken, his strength drained, his understanding heavy with consequence. He sought the meaning, and the truth was given plainly. These beasts were kingdoms. These empires would rise, terrify, conquer, and collapse. But the saints of the Most High would receive the kingdom and possess it forever. Power, the vision revealed, was temporary when seized by violence, but eternal when granted by God. Another vision followed, set in the days of Persia, when Daniel saw a ram with 2 horns pushing west, north, and south, unstoppable until a goat came from the west, crossing the earth without touching the ground, striking the ram with furious force. The great horn of the goat was broken at the height of its power, replaced by 4 others. And from one of them came a small horn that grew exceedingly arrogant, defying heaven, interrupting worship, desecrating what was holy. Daniel sought understanding again, and the message was clear. These were not myths. These were timelines. Kings and kingdoms, yet unborn, were already seen, measured, and limited. Human ambition would rage, but it would not rule history. Daniel learned that suffering would come, that truth would be attacked, that arrogance would dress itself as destiny, but that it would not endure. In another vision, Daniel stood by a river and saw 2 beings in radiant form, one asking how long these things would last. The answer was not comfort, but certainty. There would be distress such as never had been, but those written in the book would be delivered. Many who sleep in the dust of the earth would awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame. The wise would shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who led many to righteousness like the stars forever. Daniel was told to seal the words until the time of the end, not because they were unimportant, but because they were unstoppable. History would unlock them. Near the end of his life, Daniel received one final revelation, detailed and relentless, outlining conflicts between north and south. Betrayals, alliances, wars that would exhaust nations, rulers who would exalt themselves above every god, persecutions that would test the faithful, and yet an ending that was fixed and unmovable. The vision was not meant to terrify, but to anchor. It declared that chaos is not random, that suffering is not unseen, and that the Most High remains sovereign when the world appears most unstable. Daniel was told to go his way, to rest, to rise again at the end of days to receive his allotted inheritance. There was no dramatic farewell, no monument, no throne. The man who served kings was remembered by heaven.